Hey guys, it's Mathel here once again with a second video on the Crit, Facebreaker, Shield Charge, Slayer, and in this video I will show just a bit of the mapping sort of content and clear speed, as well as all of the Guardians, Shaper, and Uber Atziri, which, to my surprise, actually went pretty damn well, spoiler alert, but you'll see that for yourselves pretty damn soon. As far as the mapping of this character concerned, it was very smooth, it was very fluent, if that's a word we can use to describe mapping, and yeah, it just felt pretty damn good. So the shield charge playstyle, you basically just shield charge from one pack to another. Some packs take a couple of shield charges because they're a bit bigger and the AoE on the skill is not too crazy, but since we have very big damage, you know, for the single hit ability, and as well as that really good attack speed, it's not a big problem at all to not one-shot an entire pack. You just bounce around between a few little monsters and it actually works out pretty well. The biggest problem I did come across was Reflect, as mentioned in the previous video, though at this stage of the character, Reflect is basically solved. I probably die to Reflect maybe once every few levels, and that's if you have a fully wound up shield charge into a Reflect monster, which is a very rare occurrence. Aside from that, Reflect is not too big of a deal, but when you do wind it up with the 200% increased damage, there's really not much you can do to avoid the Reflect, except for just stack a little bit more Reflect protection in the form of Sybils. Because at this point, I do have Fortify, I have a bunch of armor, I have Masterful Force, the Reflect passive on the tree, Yagul Pantheon for the Reflect damage reduction, and also the Slayer 50%. There's not really any more I can do than that, and it is, for the most part, fine. You could also get a taste of hate, I suppose. But even you can see with content like this, we are now facing Chimera. I have vulnerability on me a lot of the time. It's only off when I'm pressing my Diamond Flask, thanks to Curse Prevention. Even with that, for the most part, we're pretty tanky to all content. It's not really a big deal. And we're actually fairly tanky given we only have, or I only have about 5.3 thousand life. I can get up to about 5,600 if I rearrange a passive or two, but I've been happy with this level of survivability and tankiness. So with all of that, I have Fortify, I have a decent amount of armor, Basalt Flask, Granite Flask, all of that put together, and the Slayer Leech passives, you do have a fairly tanky character. Like I said, the only problem is yourself, hitting yourself really hard with that Reflect, but at my stage of the character, it's not a big deal for the most part. The other potential issue, though, we kind of run into is single target. It's not incredible, and it's never supposed to be, because shield charge, well, to get maximum amount of damage, you have to ping pong back and forth and hit with a nice 200% chunky shield charge, and you're supposed to one-shot things and then move on. When you get to these bigger targets that you can't take down instantly, the single target really does stall a bit. That said, it has been adequate enough and just fine when factoring in the War Chief Totem. So a lot of our damage is going to come from that War Chief Totem, and that's why it's kind of tough on some of these Guardians when you can't get the War Chief Totem going. For example, Hydra, it's going to be dying a lot of the time. Minotaur over here, it does die pretty frequently, but you can have it up often enough, and it's really up to you to position your War Chiefs as best as possible for them to be able to survive. So you have to learn the mechanics of the bosses and then adjust accordingly with your War Chief Totem placement, and depends on what you have to do. Sometimes you have to spam them quite often just to get it down so it gets some damage in. Besides that, the shield charge damage itself isn't too bad. I just sub in Conk Effect over increased area in the setup, and I'll show you the main setup by the end of the video. But with just Conk Effect, it still does hit really hard. So we have something like 40,000 average damage, I think, unbuffed, and that's without factoring in a bunch of other things like the charge distance, Flasks, the Slayer buff of 20%, all of that, and I have something like 3 attacks a second. So you could average it out to be, I don't know, 100, 200k DPS, which is nothing to sneeze at just by itself. And then the War Chief itself is going to be doing something like 300k DPS, which is for the most part going to carry you, but shield charge itself actually lends a little bit of damage too. If you're really worried about the single target and you're playing this character by this stage, you can probably sub in a Cyclone, but you'd have to recolor your chest a little, and you'd also maybe be able to try out some Ice Crash or some Infernal Blow, but I never really felt the need. I enjoyed charging around with my shield charge and just having a bit more of a different play style. It's totally fine. It's just not the best single target in the world, and it's never supposed to be, because it does excel at clearing better than some other characters, and overall just a bit of a different play style and a bit of fun to play with. So yeah, that was Phoenix. It was actually surprisingly good. I did not think Phoenix was going to go well. And then Hydra, I don't think is ever going to be an issue, but the problem is keeping your War Chief totem down is a bit of a challenge. You have to wait for her attacks to go off and then place your totem behind her usually, and avoid balls and all that, which gets it to be a bit annoying, but overall very manageable, and just might take a bit longer because of the downtime on your War Chief. And then we come to Shaper, who really was pretty damn smooth, all things considered. I was surprised with the amount of damage I could still pull out against a Shaper, considering shield charge. But besides that, it was just an okay playstyle. The survivability is totally there. He doesn't really do too much damage to us, even though Abyssus, except for when you don't have your flasks up and he hits you several times in a row, just like right there. The ads, no problem whatsoever, and it isn't too bad once you know what you're doing with Shaper overall. It's not the fastest Shaper in the world, but it was pretty reliable. And this Shaper, as well as all the Guardians together, I didn't actually die once doing it, so it was totally fine, and really quite a surprisingly okay endgame boss killer. Now, something you will notice in especially this boss fight here is incorporating Lion's Roar into your setup can be extremely frustrating. You keep knocking back enemies like this guy, and you have to really kind of adjust your playstyle for that. And I tried to go in here for a bit of extra damage, and obviously it's kind of a patience game. If you go in too soon, you may get yourself almost killed, like I think is about to happen right there. Clench. So you can get away with it, and it can be a fairly safe playstyle with shield charge. Just depends on how desperate you get to fit in those extra pieces of damage, and sometimes I get pretty damn thirsty for that damage. Otherwise, yeah, there's really not much else to show for Shaper. You just dive around, dodge stuff, try and keep Fortify up, which is in our main 6 link. I can't possibly justify losing that in our main 6 link. I don't know, maybe you'll be able to, because it is a huge damage loss compared to some other gems, but even that said, I can't really put in a different damage gem over Fortify, because I'd hit myself to reflect even harder, which is just absurd. But as you can see, the damage on Shaper isn't too bad. I am running Blasphemy Assassin's Mark, as opposed to the previous video where I had Blasphemy Vulnerability. Assassin's Mark just gives you a bit more reliable crit chance, some power charges while clearing, and then also it's about similar damage to vulnerability for us anyway. And then, as you all know, Slayer is pretty damn amazing for its cull, so the most hectic phase, which is phase 3, doesn't really get that hectic at all. You just have to survive a couple of little attacks, and then get your sweet, big-ass Slayer cull in there, and that pretty much applies for almost every boss fight out there. Most boss fights do get just a little bit more intense in the last little bit, but Slayer completely negates that by culling them just before they get too crazy. And then we move on to Uber Atziri, which was actually a really smooth run overall. The trash was pretty damn easy, to my surprise. We were fairly tanky against it, and you one-shot just about every piece of trash. The vials were probably the slowest of the kills, I'd say, but they really didn't serve us too much danger, except for when they did those ice rains right on top of themselves. Means I can't really attack them. Lol, melee. Try and keep your War Chief totems down, have to keep reapplying Blood Rage, and yeah, avoid these lasers if they're coming in, and then get some sweet big-ass culls on them. My god, isn't Slayer nice. So this is what the trash looks like. You just, yeah, charge in and out and one-shot just about every piece of trash, and if you do get hit by some, it's pretty tanky with all our flasks up, and it really wasn't a problem at all. The biggest problem was probably here, Trio, when I tried to run through the black stuff. So when you kill one of the trios, they will drop some black spreading ground that gets more and more covering of the arena. That is pretty much physical damage, and since I'm running Abyssus, have increased phys damage taken, you can really notice when I run through it, it's a huge amount of extra damage, and I wasn't giving that enough respect when trying this boss kill, and I really should have. So when you do try one of these with an Abyssus on, even your Slayer leech and regen doesn't really cover that. Whereas the spin, when he does that, you know, whirlwind and drops some, I'm gonna say desecrated ground. That's not too bad because that's just some chaos damage and I'm not taking any extra as opposed to normal, which you can still pretty much leech through no worries. It's just the black stuff you have to be careful of because of the abysses. And then of course I didn't have fortify up there and somehow almost got one shot by the spear. So make sure you're keeping up fortify on, well, every character ever. Doesn't even have to just be this one. Fortify helps a lot against this type of content. Aside from that, we don't instantly kill things that well sometimes, so it is a bit of a clusterfuck, kind of, at the end here, as you can see. And this was the first Atziri attempt. I kind of went for the spear ad when it didn't really make sense to. Probably should have gone for the other ones, and then I adjusted accordingly. Didn't end up dying on the Atziri except to a piece of stupid trash. Otherwise, everything else was pretty clean and manageable. It's kind of up to your own skill for this sort of skill and playstyle, which was, for me, well, was rather fun and challenging to change up your playstyle a bit and really have shield charge be your main damage dealer rather than just your movement skill. So I'm surprised it took on all the content, all the endgame shit, and I will show you what the character looks like at this stage. So as a final wrap up for the character, I will go over the gear and a little few changes I've made. It is currently level 92, and I will mention right off the bat that I was totally wrong about Facebreakers when they say 800% more unarmed damage. Which means what I said, you don't really need that much physical damage on the tree. It's not at all how that works. That is 800% more unarmed on top of everything else, whereas these are all increased modifiers. Your physical damage on that. So the physical damage is still relevant, as I will show you here in the old path of building. This is a passive tree, and when you click show node power, it does show you that, these damage nodes, let's just say 12% damage, is still fairly relevant. That is a different type of scaling to the 800% more overall on top of everything else. The unarmed percent is still really important, so try and get as high as possible on that. But as far as your passive tree is concerned, it's not just attack speed, you do still want some physical damage, though for this build to function, a lot of what you want really is attack speed, and that's where you get it from jewels. So jewels specifically do function pretty nicely in this build to up your attack speed. Just a really large amount. For every 2 passives you spend for a jewel, you can get something like, on average, 14 to 18 attack speed, and that's quite a lot of extra utility and smoothness and comfort for your shield charge overall. So until I was running all these attack speed jewels, I did use a faster attacks in my setup. At this point, that doesn't seem to be necessary, and my current 6 link is basically shield charge into fortify, damage on full life, melee physical, crit strikes, and then my last link is increased area, which I sub out for conk effect on the really serious boss fights, which is only the tier 16s at this point. And then our 4 link for our Warchief totem is Ancestral Warchief, Maim, conk effect, and melee physical damage. So those 2 are our combos for all the damage, and you can see here, I talked a bit about the damage, but overall the actual full buffed damage is about 100k per shield charge with conk effect, and you hit about 3 to 4 times a second. That is without our have you killed recently buff. So over here is another 20% on top of all of that. I'm not counting that because a lot of the time during boss fights you won't actually get that, but specifically what we're talking about is this over here that gives 20% more damage if you've killed recently. So it's a huge nice boost, as well as onslaught if you've killed a rare or unique recently too. Don't think I included that either, which wait, no, I did. My bad. There it is. So without it, 3.5, but that is with Vile Haste as well, I believe. So yeah, you gotta be careful about what you include over there. Basically, Blood Rage is another one, but you will always have that up, and you do have to keep refreshing it. Because it's pretty important for our leech. Didn't include power charges or frenzy charges, and another thing is Unholy Might. You'd get that from a Sin's Rebirth. Now that is something you could choose to do, and it would be better than the base ult for some fights where you just don't think you need the base ult, or probably also better than a Lion's Roar where you wouldn't scale your physical a bit more that way. You just scale some chaos instead, which would still be pretty damn good. But those are our current flasks, and so I did chuck in the Lion's Roar instead of the Witchfire, so we don't have the Witchfire anymore, and instead we're running Assassin's Mark and Blasphemy, and the only way I can run all of the shit I'm currently running is with a level 3 all 4 in power. So that is Blasphemy, Arctic Armor, and Herald of Ash. Herald of Ash, for the most part, is there for aesthetics. It feels really bad to not have it. The overlap damage and the fire damage itself isn't that substantial or significant, but it feels shit not having at least some sort of burn or freeze in your build whenever you're charging around. So bear that in mind. So that's where we get a lot of our mana utility from the Enlightened level 4. You could manage a level 3, and overall you'd still have some amount of unreserved mana here, 100, but that doesn't quite feel too smooth, so at least a level 3 makes it so you can charge a few times before you run out. And currently, if you're curious, our mana leech comes from this over here, Soul Raker, and the only reason that applies or that we're getting all of this is because we're running the Rigwald's Claw, Curse, Wereclaw Talisman. So that's how we're crit, why we're crit, and that's why you pick up all of these claw nodes. The leech itself, though, is general, it doesn't matter, applies to everything, and we get our leech for actual life over here, here, and Blood Rage. That's where we get a lot of leech from, so try and keep up Blood Rage as often as possible, because it will go down otherwise. And then as far as other changes from the previous video, not really much happened. I did want to get a second steel ring because it is a big deal for your damage, but I rolled a few steel rings and didn't really get too far. Eventually I just found this ring off the ground, self-found, you know, by the way, and it was a pretty insane ring. I couldn't really go past it, so it helps overcap my resist for all kinds of LE weakness and shit. And it just had some good fizz damage, some good life, so I decided to run this ring instead of going for another steel. So obviously you can get a bit more damage with a steel ring, and that's entirely up to you. You can also get more damage with a Meganauds or a Rustic Sash, and you can get a bit more life running a Belly of the Beast, but the problem is we do really need armor, and we don't actually have much life on our build. So as far as life is concerned, I have a bit here, a bunch here, and some here, and then your chest and your shield. Belly of the Beast scales percent life, which means the more life you already have, the better the Belly of the Beast will be, whereas we don't have much life, so we do need an Astral with a bunch of life and resist, as well as the armor. And since I already have a fairly decent amount of life on the tree, 185%, with the option to go for 200 if you go up here instead of a few other points, yeah, you get a lot of percent life, and that means Belly of the Beast really isn't worth that much to our character. Now, the only other thing I did change was some of our passive tree to fit in Master of Force and Claws of Pride. So I think I ended up dropping this down here, and it feels like it helps, but it doesn't seem that necessary for most of the time. It's just if you want to really truly try and fix Reflect, you get Master of Force, you run a base ult, with reduced charges used, and this is for a bit of extra crit as well. Overall, I thought it was worth it, and this ugly ass triangle here is just a fact of life. It's what we got to do. And then you can also grab this 8 fizz instead of this evasion, which is probably the right move, but it honestly doesn't really matter at this point for my character. So lastly, I'll show you the War Chief damage, buffed up, same as the shield charge, is 450k DPS, which is pretty damn relevant because this is about, what, 300 in perfect circumstances, as well as, you know, the, of course, extra damage if you're going back and forth, getting the big hits in. But overall, it is War Chief that's doing a lot of our damage, so keep in mind with that, that you do have to focus on dropping him down in the right places a lot of the time. Also running a Immortal Call setup here. Immortal Call, cast some damage taken, increased duration. Doesn't feel that necessary, but it does help, so I definitely went ahead and did that. And then our setup over here is just Ash, Ice Golem, and Blood Rage, and our Pantheons. I ended up grabbing Soul of Lunaris just for the additional fizz damage reduction for each nearby enemy, up to 8%. So overall, that usually helps against Reflect because it's not usually just one by itself, it's in a pack, and that will help you avoid some extra fizz damage. And of course, you need Soul of Yugal for reduced Reflect damage taken. Overall, that is it for the character. Shield Charge, it was pretty damn fun. Is it worth playing? Yeah, I don't think it's not worth playing. It's, if you've exhausted a lot of your options, I think it's pretty damn fun, enjoyable, and clears relatively well. I did play a bit around with the non-crit shield charge version. It's got a lot less damage, so if you want to play a shield charge with Facebreakers, this is probably the right way to go about it. But yeah, entirely up to you guys. You can play around with the tree yourself and maybe come up with something equally as competitive in the non-crit scene. Quite likely it will involve 2 Warchief Totems though, just to get that damage in. This has, however, inspired me to maybe try a Doriani's Fist version of this sort of build with Shield Charge, or even the actual Touch of God skill, because it looks pretty viable and it may actually be fun to play. So I might play around with that in the future, look out for that. Could happen, could not, who knows. That's it for the character though, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video of the character, and thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.